The first light of dawn crept across the worn linoleum floor of Betty's place like an old friend returning after a long absence. The diner sat at the heart of Millhaven, Oregon, a town small enough that everyone knew your business, but big enough to harbor secrets. Perched on the California border, Millhaven had once been a logging boomtown before the industry dried up in the 70s, leaving behind weathered men with calloused hands and stories that grew taller with each passing year. Betty's place hadn't changed since 1965, from the red vinyl booths to the chrome-edged countertop that Betty Sullivan polished every morning as religiously as some folks attended church. The coffee was strong enough to dissolve a spoon, the pancakes large enough to use as throw pillows, and the conversation as comfortable as a well-worn pair of boots. Emma Sullivan nursed her third cup of coffee, her emerald eyes shadowed from a 12-hour night shift at Millhaven Community Hospital. At 35, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had stared down death and told it to wait its turn. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, a few strands escaping, to frame a face that turned heads even without makeup, high cheekbones, and full lips that rarely needed the pink gloss she occasionally applied. "You look like you wrestled with the devil and lost honey," Betty said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs and hash browns in front of her daughter-in-law. At 62, Betty was a force of nature, her silver hair cut in a practical bob that framed a face lined by years of early mornings and late nights. "Eat. Doctor's orders, and I may not have a fancy degree, but I've been prescribing food as medicine longer than most of those white coats have been alive." Emma smiled, the expression warming her tired features. 3 cardiac arrests, a bus accident with 7 trauma patients, and a toddler who swallowed a quarter. Just another Thursday night in paradise. The television mounted in the corner droned on with the morning news, the volume low enough to be ignored but loud enough to catch snippets of the outside world. Emma's attention snapped to the screen as the image changed to a convoy of motorcycles thundering down a highway. Law enforcement across 3 states has issued warnings about the notorious motorcycle gang known as the Hellbound Riders, who are reportedly moving into the Pacific Northwest region. The newscaster announced his expression, grave. The group has been linked to drug trafficking, extortion, and violence across the Southwest. Police advise citizens to exercise caution and report any suspicious activity. The camera panned across the riders, their leather jackets emblazoned with a skull wreathed in flames, before focusing on their leader, a bear of a man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. "Turn that garbage off, Hank," Betty called to the short order cook. "We don't need that kind of negativity with breakfast." The television switched to a weather report, but Emma's eyes remained fixed on the screen, a chill running down her spine despite the hot coffee in her hands. Something about the leader's eyes had triggered an uncomfortable sense of familiarity. The diner's ancient phone rang behind the counter, its shrill tone cutting through the morning chatter. Betty answered, then held out the receiver. "Emma, it's Thomas." Emma took the phone, a smile replacing her frown. Thomas Sullivan had been her anchor for 10 years of marriage, the man who could still make her heart skip a beat with just a smile. "Hey, stranger," she said softly. "Miss me yet?" Thomas's voice came through clear, despite the distance from Portland, where he worked as a physician at the VA hospital. Every minute, his tone shifted, becoming more hesitant. "Listen, Em, something's come up. I need to stay in Portland a few more days." Emma's smile faded. "But our anniversary—" "I know, I'm sorry. It's an emergency situation with one of my patients, a veteran in crisis. I can't leave him now." In their decade together, Thomas had never missed their anniversary. As a former combat medic who now treated veterans with PTSD and physical injuries, he understood commitment better than most. If he said he couldn't leave, it was serious. "It's okay," she lied, disappointment settling in her chest. "Save lives first, celebrate later. That's our motto, right? You're the best, Em. I promise I'll make it up to you." He paused, his voice dropping. "Have there been any strangers in town? Anyone asking questions?" The question caught her off guard. "No, should there be?" "Probably nothing, just something I heard about motorcycle gangs moving into rural areas." "Be careful. Okay, lock the doors. Don't work any extra shifts until I get back." When the warning raised the hairs on the back of her neck. "Thomas, you're scaring me." "I don't mean to. It's probably nothing." His voice softened. "I love you, Em, more than anything." "I love you too." The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at the receiver, the morning suddenly colder, despite the steam rising from her untouched breakfast. Betty slid into the booth across from her, concern etching deeper lines around her eyes. Everything okay with my boy? Emma set the phone aside, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He's stuck in Portland. Patient emergency. Betty studied her face, decades of reading people allowing her to see past the brave front. That's not all, is it? He warned me about strangers in town, seemed worried. Emma glanced at the now silent television. You don't think those bikers would come to Millhaven, do you? We're hardly on anyone's map. Those types go where there's money to be made, Betty said, her voice hardening. And with the new highway expansion bringing more traffic through town, who knows what might follow? She patted Emma's hand. Don't borrow trouble. Eat your breakfast before it gets cold. Emma obeyed, but the food had lost its appeal, sitting in her stomach like lead. As she ate, her eyes drifted to the window, watching as Millhaven came to life. The maple trees lining Main Street blazed in autumn glory, their leaves a riot of crimson and gold against the deep blue October sky. Sheriff Jim Harper made his morning rounds, tipping his hat to Mrs. Peterson as she unlocked her flower shop. Doc Montgomery's ancient Buick pulled into its reserved space at the hospital across the street. Normal, ordinary, safe. So why couldn't she shake the feeling that everything was about to change? Millhaven Community Hospital was a 3-story brick building that had started life as a tuberculosis sanitarium in the 1930s before being converted to a general hospital after World War II. Its corridors still bore the high ceilings and wide windows of its original purpose, designed to let in maximum light and air. Modern medicine had grafted itself onto the aging structure, CT scanners and cardiac monitors, now sharing space with terrazzo floors and Art Deco light fixtures. Emma made her rounds through the emergency department, checking on patients from the night shift she'd handed over. As the head ER nurse, she felt responsible for everyone who came through those sliding doors, whether she was officially on duty or not. The ED was quiet now, morning sunlight streaming through the windows, the chaos of the night shift replaced by the methodical routine of day staff. Emma paused at the nurse's station, reviewing charts and trying to ignore the weight of fatigue pressing down on her shoulders. She should go home, crawl into bed and sleep until her next shift, but Thomas's warning had left her unsettled. I thought I sent you home hours ago, a gravelly voice said from behind her. Dr. Walter Montgomery stood in his customary pose, hands in the pockets of his white coat, his tall frame slightly stooped after decades of bending over patients. At 68, his hair had long since turned white, but his blue eyes remained sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. As the hospital's medical director and chief of emergency medicine, he'd been Emma's mentor since she'd arrived in Millhaven fresh out of nursing school. Just making sure my patients are behaving themselves, Emma replied, closing the chart she'd been reviewing. Your patients are fine. You, on the other hand, look like you could use a week of sleep. Walter studied her with the same intense focus he brought to difficult diagnoses. Something's bothering you. Emma hesitated. Walter had a way of seeing through people's defenses, a skill honed during his time as a field surgeon in Korea. He'd patched up soldiers who'd lied about their injuries to stay with their units, seen through the brave faces of young men terrified of dying far from home. A troubled nurse was an open book to him. Thomas called this morning. He's staying in Portland longer than planned. Walter nodded, waiting for the rest. He warned me about strangers in town, specifically mentioned motorcycle gangs. Emma gestured toward the break room where the morning news played on a small television. Then I saw a report about some group called the Hellbound Riders moving into the area. Walter's expression remained neutral, but Emma caught the slight narrowing of his eyes, a tell he displayed only when concerned. Probably nothing. These groups pass through, make noise, move on. That's what I told myself. She rubbed her eyes. But Thomas has never missed our anniversary before, and he's not the type to worry without reason. Walter placed a paternal hand on her shoulder. Go home, Emma. Get some sleep. The world has a way of looking more manageable after a few hours of rest. Emma nodded, gathering her things. As she turned to leave, Walter called after her. Lock your doors, just as a precaution. The second warning in one morning did nothing to ease her anxiety. Emma's small Victorian house sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the hospital, its blue paint and white trim well-maintained despite its age. Thomas had bought it for them when they'd moved to Millhaven, seeing past the peeling wallpaper and outdated fixtures to the home it could become. Together, they'd stripped floors, painted walls, and made it theirs room by room. Now it felt too quiet, the absence of Thomas's presence, more noticeable after his strange call. Emma dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off her shoes, and moved through the house on autopilot, drawing blinds against the morning sun and checking locks despite the town's low crime rate. In the bedroom, she stripped off her scrubs and stepped into the shower, letting hot water sluice away the hospital smells and physical fatigue. Her mind, however, refused to quiet. 10 years of marriage. 10 years since Thomas Sullivan had walked into the Portland hospital where she'd been working, a newly discharged Army medic, starting medical school on the GI Bill. She'd been assigned to show him around, expecting another arrogant doctor-to-be. Instead, she'd found a man whose quiet competence matched her own, whose eyes held the weight of what he'd seen in combat, but still managed to crinkle at the corners when he smiled. Their courtship had been swift, but not rash. Two people recognizing in each other the same dedication to healing, the same dry humor that helped them cope with the daily tragedies of medicine. They'd married in a small ceremony with Betty beaming in the front row, then settled into the rhythm of their lives, Thomas completing medical school while Emma supported them both. The move to Millhaven had come after his residency, a chance for Thomas to work with veterans at the Portland VA, while Emma found a position where she could make a real difference in a community that needed her skills. They talked about children, but somehow the time had never seemed right, both of them consumed by careers that demanded everything they had. Emma stepped from the shower and wrapped herself in a towel, wiping steam from the mirror to stare at her reflection. The face looking back seemed older than her 35 years, fine lines beginning to form at the corners of her eyes. When had that happened? She moved to the bedroom and pulled on an oversized t-shirt that had once belonged to Thomas, the Army medical insignia faded from countless washings. As she slid between cool sheets, her hand drifted to the empty space beside her, the space that would remain empty on their anniversary for the first time in a decade. Sleep came in fits and starts, her dreams filled with the rumble of motorcycles and the image of eyes that seemed to stare directly into her soul. She woke several times, reaching for Thomas, only to find cold sheets before falling back into restless slumber. The phone's shrill ring jerked her awake at 3 in the afternoon. Emma fumbled for the receiver, heart pounding with the disoriented panic of someone woken from deep sleep. Mrs. Sullivan. The voice belonged to Janet Wilson, the day charge nurse. I'm sorry to wake you, but we need you to come in. There's been a situation. What kind of situation? Emma was already sitting up, reaching for clothes. Multiple gunshot victims, teenagers, one critical. Dr. Montgomery asked for you specifically. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Emma dressed with the efficiency of someone accustomed to emergency calls, her body moving through the motions while her mind raced ahead to what she might find at the hospital. Gunshot wounds were rare in Millhaven, usually hunting accidents rather than violence. Multiple victims suggested something more sinister. The hospital parking lot was uncharacteristically full for mid-afternoon. 2 sheriff's department vehicles parked haphazardly near the emergency entrance. Emma hurried through the automatic doors, the controlled chaos of the ER, a familiar environment despite the unusual circumstances. Walter met her at the nurse's station, his surgical cap already in place. 3 teenagers shot at the old quarry, 2 stable, 1 critical. Sheriff thinks it was a drug deal gone bad. He lowered his voice. The stable ones have been uncooperative, refusing to say what happened. What do you need me to do? Take charge out here while I operate on the critical one, and see if you can get anything out of the other 2. They might talk to you. Emma nodded, slipping into her professional role like a second skin. She reviewed the charts for the 2 stable victims, both 17-year-old males with flesh wounds, before entering the curtained area where they waited. The first boy, identified as Jason Miller, sat on the edge of a gurney, his arm bandaged where a bullet had grazed his bicep. His face was pale beneath his acne eyes darting nervously around the room. I'm Emma Sullivan, the charge nurse, she said, checking his vital signs. How's the pain, Jason? Fine, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Emma worked efficiently, changing his bandage and checking for signs of infection. Want to tell me what happened at the quarry? Already told the sheriff. It was an accident. We were messing around with a gun we found. The lie was so transparent, Emma almost smiled. That's interesting, because the bullet that hit you came from a different caliber weapon than the ones that hit your friends. Unless you found an entire arsenal out there. Jason's eyes widened slightly before his expression closed again. I don't know what you're talking about. Emma moved to the second boy, Craig Watson, who had taken a bullet through the fleshy part of his thigh. His demeanor was even more withdrawn than Jason's, his answers monosyllabic as she checked his wound. As she adjusted his bandage, her eyes caught a small mark on his inner wrist, partially hidden by his watch band. She shifted his arm slightly, revealing a tiny tattoo, a skull wreathed in flames, the emblem of the Hellbound Riders. Emma kept her expression neutral, finishing her assessment before stepping outside the curtain. Sheriff Harper stood in the corridor, his weathered face grim beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. "Any luck?" he asked quietly. "None with getting them to talk, but the second boy has a Hellbound Riders tattoo on his wrist. Fresh from the look of it." Harper's frown deepened. "That matches what I found at the scene. Tire tracks from multiple motorcycles. Shell casings from 3 different weapons." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "We haven't had gang activity in Millhaven in my 20 years as sheriff. Why start now?" "The news said they were moving into the region. Maybe we're just in their path." "Maybe." Harper didn't sound convinced. "Keep an eye on those boys. If they say anything about who shot them, call me immediately." Emma returned to the nurse's station, unease settling in her stomach like a cold stone. The coincidence was too great. Thomas's warning, the news report, and now teenagers with gang tattoos turning up with gunshot wounds. Something was happening in Millhaven, something that threatened the peace of their small community. And somehow she couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. Emma's shift stretched past midnight, the ER unusually busy for a Friday evening. The critical gunshot victim, 16-year-old Michael Chen, had survived surgery, but remained in intensive care, his prognosis uncertain. His parents maintained a vigil by his bedside, their faces drawn with worry and confusion, unable to reconcile their honor student son with whatever had happened at the quarry. The other 2 boys had been treated and released into the custody of their parents with strict instructions to return for follow-up care. Sheriff Harper had stationed a deputy outside Michael's room, though whether for the boys' protection or to prevent him from leaving remained unclear. Emma finished her charting and prepared to hand off to the night nurse when Walter appeared at her side, his surgical scrubs replaced by his customary white coat, though the fatigue of a long operation showed in the deeper lines around his eyes. "Walk with me," he said quietly, guiding her toward his office. The medical director's office was a testament to Walter's long career, diplomas and certificates sharing wall space with photographs spanning decades. A faded picture of a much younger Walter in Army Medical Corps uniform stood on his desk, his arm around a fellow surgeon in the dusty light of a MASH unit in Korea. He closed the door behind them and sank into his worn leather chair with a sigh that seemed to come from his very bones. "I spoke to the town council about increasing security at the hospital. Request denied." Emma leaned against the edge of his desk. "They don't think 3 teenagers with gunshot wounds warrants concern. Budget constraints." Walter set his tone, making clear what he thought of the excuse. "They suggested we rely on the sheriff's department if we need additional security. The same department that has 1 sheriff and 3 deputies covering the entire county. The very same." Walter removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Emma, have you noticed anything unusual about Thomas lately before he left for Portland?" The question caught her off guard. "Jamad." "Unusual how Bushtin, distracted, concerned, making calls he didn't want you to overhear." Emma's defenses rose automatically. "Are you suggesting my husband is involved in something questionable?" Walter held up a placating hand. "Not at all. I'm trying to understand why these Hellbound Riders might be coming to Millhaven of all places, and why Thomas seemed concerned enough to warn you about them specifically." The implications settled over Emma like a shadow. "You think they're connected, Thomas and these bikers?" "I think it's an unusual coincidence. Thomas is a combat veteran who treats other veterans. Some veterans, unfortunately, find their way into motorcycle gangs after discharge, seeking the Brotherhood they lost when they left the service." Emma shook her head firmly. "If you're suggesting Thomas has patients who became gang members, that's possible. But he'd never be involved with them beyond treatment. You know him better than that." Walter studied her face, his expression softening. "I do know him, which is why I'm concerned. Thomas Sullivan is one of the most dedicated physicians I've ever met. If he's worried enough to warn you, there's a reason." Emma couldn't argue with that logic. "What do? We stay alert. We watch for unusual activity, and we hope I'm being an overcautious old man." Walter stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "Get some rest." I have a feeling we're going to need all hands on deck in the coming days. Emma left the hospital shortly after midnight, the autumn air crisp enough to require the light jacket she pulled tighter around herself. Millhaven after dark was normally peaceful. The streets empty, save for the occasional car heading home from the town's single bar or the 24-hour diner. Tonight, however, an unfamiliar tension seemed to hang in the air, as if the town itself were holding its breath. She was halfway home when she heard the distinctive rumble of motorcycle engines breaking the night silence. Emma stepped into the shadow of a storefront as the procession rounded the corner onto Main Street, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. 12 motorcycles, mostly Harley-Davidsons, from the late 1970s and early 1980s thundered past her hiding place, their riders clad in leather jackets emblazoned with the now familiar Skull and Flames emblem. They moved with the precision of a military convoy, maintaining exact distances between bikes, their formation disciplined, despite the late hour and empty streets. At the front rode a man whose massive frame made his motorcycle seem almost too small beneath him. Even in the dim light, Emma could see the silver streaks in his beard and the cold calculation in his eyes as he surveyed the town they were passing through. Raymond Reaper King, though Emma didn't yet know his name, carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command his posture, even on the motorcycle suggesting military training. The procession continued down Main Street, eventually turning toward the edge of town, where a defunct truck stop had recently been purchased by an out-of-state investor. The rumble of engines faded into the distance, but the sense of foreboding they left behind lingered like wood smoke on a still night. Emma waited several minutes before continuing, home her nurse's instincts for self-preservation overriding her curiosity. Once inside, she double-checked every lock and drew every blind before attempting to call Thomas at their usual check-in time. The phone rang several times before rolling to the hospital answering service, unusual even if Thomas was on call. Sleep eluded her, despite her exhaustion, her mind replaying the image of the bikers' procession through town. There had been something almost ceremonial about it, as if they were staking a claim or sending a message. Not the chaotic arrival of troublemakers looking for a good time, but the calculated entrance of an occupying force. Morning brought little relief. Gray clouds hanging low over Millhaven like a reflection of Emma's mood. She dressed for her shift with mechanical efficiency, her body moving through familiar motions, while her mind raced with questions that had no answers. Betty's place was already busy when Emma arrived, the Saturday breakfast crowd filling every booth and most of the counter seats. Emma slid onto the last available stool, nodding to familiar faces as conversations continued around her. "Coffee's already poured," Betty said, sliding a steaming mug toward her. "You look like you need it black today." "That obvious, huh?" Emma attempted a smile. "Honey, I've been reading faces across this counter for 40 years. Yours is saying you didn't sleep a wink." Betty leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Word is those bikers have taken over the old truck stop, started moving in furniture and equipment yesterday. You heard about that already? Hank's brother drives the delivery truck for the hardware store. Made a large drop-off out there yesterday afternoon. Said they were setting up what looked like a clubhouse. Paid cash, tipped well, but made it clear they valued their privacy." The diner's door opened, the bell above it jingling cheerfully despite the tension that immediately filled the room as three of the hellbound riders entered. They were smaller than their leader, but no less intimidating in their leather vests and heavy boots. Their eyes swept the diner, assessing exits and occupants with practiced efficiency before they claimed an empty booth near the window. Betty squared her shoulders and approached their table, notepad in hand. "Welcome to Betty's place. What can I get you boys?" The apparent leader, a man with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos, smiled without warmth. "Coffee for starters, sweetheart, and a recommendation for the house specialty. The pancakes and bacon will put meat on your bones," Betty replied, her tone professional, despite the tension evident in her stance. "Coffee coming right up." As Betty moved to the coffee station, the bikers' attention shifted, scanning the diner with the calculated assessment of predators. Their gaze eventually settled on Emma, the leader's eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to place her. Emma met his stare directly, refusing to show the unease crawling along her spine. After a moment, his lips curved in a smile that never reached his eyes, and he turned back to his companions. Betty returned with their coffee, took their orders, and retreated to the relative safety of the kitchen. The diner's usual morning chatter had diminished to awkward silence, broken only by the clink of silverware against plates and murmured conversations. Emma finished her coffee quickly, leaving cash on the counter and nodding to Betty, who watched her with worried eyes. As she passed the biker's table, the leader spoke without looking up from his coffee. "Nurse at the local hospital, right? Took care of those boys yesterday." Emma froze her hand, instinctively tightening on her purse strap. "I don't discuss patients." He chuckled, finally raising his gaze to meet hers. "Admirable. Professional. Those boys made some poor choices, getting involved in business that wasn't theirs. Youth, am I right, always thinking they're invincible." The threat was clear, despite the casual delivery. Emma maintained her composure with the same control she used when faced with belligerent patients in the ER. "Enjoy your breakfast, gentlemen." She continued toward the door, feeling their eyes on her back like the heat from an open flame. Outside, the gray morning seemed suddenly brighter by comparison to the atmosphere inside the diner. Emma had just reached her car when Sheriff Harper pulled into the parking lot, his official vehicle coming to a stop beside her. He rolled down his window, his expression grim beneath his Stetson. "Morning, Emma. I see we have visitors in town." "3 of them are having breakfast inside. They knew about the teenagers from yesterday." Harper's frown deepened. Not surprising, considering it was probably their handiwork. "Those boys were running drugs for the hellbound riders. Got caught skimming profits from what little the Chen boy was willing to tell us when he woke up. They're setting up at the old truck stop. So I've heard. I'm heading out there after I fuel up. Thought I'd introduce myself, make sure they understand how things work in Millhaven." Emma studied the sheriff's weathered face, seeing behind the confident facade to the concern beneath. Jim Harper was a good lawman, fair and dedicated, but he was one man facing an organized group with unknown intentions. "Be careful, Jim. There were at least 12 of them riding in last night. Military precision. Their leader looks like he could bench press your patrol car." Harper's eyebrows rose. "You saw them arrive?" "On my way home from the hospital. They weren't trying to be subtle." "Interesting." Harper drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "You be careful too, Emma. These types usually respect medical personnel, but I wouldn't count on it." Emma nodded and continued to her car, the weight of foreboding settling heavier on her shoulders with each passing hour. As she drove to the hospital, she passed the turnoff to the old truck stop, noticing several motorcycles parked in the formerly empty lot and activity around the main building. Millhaven Community Hospital seemed like a sanctuary compared to the unease elsewhere in town, its familiar routines a comfort despite the underlying tension. Emma changed into her scrubs and began her rounds, checking first on Michael Chen, who had been moved from intensive care to a regular room, his condition upgraded to stable. The boy looked younger in sleep, the bravado that had sustained him through his police interview replaced by the vulnerability of youth. Emma checked his vital signs and adjusted his IV, wondering what had led a straight-A student with college aspirations into the orbit of a motorcycle gang. She was updating his chart when a commotion at the nurse's station drew her attention. A deep voice commanding rather than asking resonated down the corridor. "I'm here to see Michael Chen, room 212. Emma stepped into the hallway to find Raymond King towering over the desk, his massive frame making the space seem suddenly smaller. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had appeared on his motorcycle, standing at least 6'4", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His leather vest bore patches indicating military service, the dates corresponding to Desert Storm. The day nurse, a young woman named Rachel, looked relieved when she spotted Emma. "Mrs. Sullivan, this gentleman is asking about the Chen boy." Emma approached this desk, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. "I'm Emma Sullivan, the charge nurse. How can I help you?" King turned to face her, recognition flickering in his eyes. "We have a mutual friend at the diner." His voice carried the gravelly quality of someone who had spent years issuing orders in combat zones. "I'm here to check on young Michael. Community concern, you understand. Mr. Chen is under police protection. No visitors except family without sheriff's approval." King's smile never reached his eyes, cold and gray as winter steel. "I'm sure we can work something out. I only need 5 minutes of the boy's time." "I'm afraid that's not possible. Hospital policy is quite strict regarding protected patients." King studied her, his gaze calculating. "You remind me of someone. Military bearing. The way you hold your ground." He tilted his head slightly. "Your husband served The question sent a chill through Emma's veins. I don't see how that's relevant to hospital visitation policies. Just making conversation. Community relations are important to us. King reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it on the counter. When the boy's feeling better, tell him Reaper stopped by. Tell him we're concerned about his recovery. Emma didn't touch the card. I'll pass your message to the sheriff. King's laugh held no humor. You do that. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. Sullivan? Any relation to a Thomas Sullivan, used to be a combat medic with the 44th Medical Brigade? Emma's heart stuttered in her chest, but her expression remained neutral through years of practice dealing with volatile situations. I don't discuss personal information with strangers, Mr. King. Not strangers, Nurse Sullivan. Old friends. King's smile widened, showing teeth. Tell Thomas that Reaper sends his regards. Tell him I'm looking forward to our reunion. With that, he strode toward the exit, his heavy boots echoing on the linoleum like distant thunder. Emma waited until he was out of sight before allowing her professional mask to slip her hand, reaching for the counter to steady herself as the implications of King's words sank in. Thomas had known this man served with him, perhaps. And King Reaper had come to Millhaven specifically because of that connection. The question was why and what it meant for all of them. The revelation that Thomas had some connection to Raymond Reaper King left Emma reeling, her mind racing to reconcile the man she'd married with whatever past linked him to the leader of a motorcycle gang. She finished her shift on autopilot, years of professional training allowing her to function despite the turmoil in her thoughts. As soon as she was off duty, Emma sought out Walter, finding him in his office, reviewing patient charts with the same methodical attention he'd applied to medicine for over 40 years. He looked up as she entered, reading her expression with the ease of long familiarity. Something's happened, he said, setting aside his work. Emma closed the door behind her and sank into the chair across from his desk. Reaper King came to the hospital today, looking for the Chen boy. Walter's posture stiffened. Did he see him? No, but he knew Thomas. Asked if I was related to Thomas Sullivan from the 44th Medical Brigade. Said to tell him Reaper sends his regards and is looking forward to their reunion. Walter removed his glasses, a gesture Emma had come to recognize as his way of buying time to consider his response. The 44th was deployed to Desert Storm, combat support hospital unit primarily. Thomas never mentioned anyone named Reaper or King. Would you if you'd left that life behind? Walter's question was gentle but pointed. Military service creates bonds, but not all of them are ones we wish to maintain in civilian life. Emma leaned forward, frustration edging her voice. Walter, what's going on? You know something, don't you? The old doctor sighed, replacing his glasses and folding his hands on the desk. I've been making some calls since we spoke last night. Old Army contacts friends who still have connections to military intelligence. And Raymond King was indeed with the 44th Medical Brigade, not as medical personnel, but as a patient advocate and security specialist. He and Thomas would have worked closely together. Walter paused, choosing his words with care. King received a dishonorable discharge in 1992 for violent conduct and suspected ties to drug trafficking on base. And now he's the leader of a motorcycle gang moving into our town, specifically asking about my husband. Emma ran a hand through her hair, displacing strands from her usually neat bun. I need to talk to Thomas. I've been trying to reach him since last night. No answer at the Portland VA, which is unusual. His colleague, Dr. Jensen, said Thomas requested emergency leave 3 days ago. Personal matter, he said. The information hit Emma like a physical blow. That's impossible. Thomas called me from Portland yesterday morning. Walter's expression confirmed her suspicion that something was very wrong. Emma, I think you should stay with Betty for a few days, just until we figure out what's happening. I'm not running away from my own home because my husband has some connection to a biker gang leader. Emma stood, determination replacing confusion. I'm going to find out what's really going on. Emma, I'll be careful, I promise. She softened her tone, recognizing the paternal concern in Walter's eyes. But I need answers, and I'm not going to get them hiding at Betty's. Walter nodded reluctantly. At least take this. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small revolver, sliding it across the desk. My service weapon from Korea. Still works perfectly. Do you know how to use it? Emma picked up the gun, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. Thomas taught me. Said a nurse working night shifts should know how to protect herself. Keep it close and call us at any hour if you need help. Emma secured the revolver in her purse and left Walter's office, her mind clearer now that she had a purpose. She would go home, search for any information Thomas might have left behind, and try again to reach him. If that failed, she would consider her next steps carefully. The house was exactly as she'd left it that morning, no signs of disturbance or unwanted visitors. Emma moved methodically through each room looking for anything unusual or out of place, any clue to what might have prompted Thomas's strange behavior. In their home office, she booted up the computer they shared, searching through Thomas's files for anything related to his military service or Raymond King. Most of his documents were medical articles or patient notes, nothing that shed light on the current situation. Frustrated, Emma turned to the filing cabinet where they kept important papers. Birth certificates, marriage license, insurance policies, Thomas's military records, all the documentation of their life together. She pulled out the folder labeled Army ETS and spread its contents across the desk. Thomas's service records showed his assignments with the 44th Medical Brigade, his commendations for service in Desert Storm, and his honorable discharge in 1995. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the current situation. She was about to replace the folder when a photograph slipped from between the pages of his discharge papers. The image showed a group of men in desert camouflage standing before a medical tent in what was clearly Saudi Arabia or Iraq. Thomas stood second from the left, younger and leaner, but with the same steady eyes and quiet confidence. And beside him, arm thrown casually around Thomas's shoulders, stood a man Emma recognized immediately despite the lack of beard and civilian clothing. Raymond King. They were smiling, these two men who now seemed to exist in entirely different worlds, the camaraderie between them evident even across the decades. Emma turned the photograph over, finding a handwritten note, 44th Medical Brigade Operation Desert Storm, 1991, the best damn team in theater. The names were listed below: Thomas Sullivan, Raymond King, Michael Foster, James Wilson, Robert Chen. Emma's breath caught. Chen, the same surname as the injured teenager. Coincidence or connection? She was still staring at the photograph when the phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Emma reached for the receiver, hoping to hear Thomas's voice. "Hello, Tbaba." "Mrs. Sullivan." Raymond King's voice flowed through the line like oil, smooth but with an underlying toxicity. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Emma's grip tightened on the receiver. "How did you get this number?" "Millhaven's a small town. People are helpful when asked politely." The implied threat hung in the air between them. "I was hoping to speak with Thomas, but I understand he's out of town." "Portland, was it?" "What do you want, Mr. King?" "Just a friendly conversation with an old war buddy. We have unfinished business, Thomas and I. Personal matters that need resolution." Emma chose her words carefully, aware that revealing too much could be dangerous. "I'm sure if Thomas wanted to resolve anything with you, he would have done so years ago." King's laugh held no humor. "Thomas always did pick stubborn women. Your husband owes me, Mrs. Sullivan, a debt that's long overdue. You tell him Reaper came to collect, and this time I won't be taking no for an answer. I'll give him the message if he calls. When Mrs. Sullivan, not if, we both know Thomas will be coming back to Millhaven very soon. He won't leave his beautiful wife to face the hellbound riders alone. Not the Thomas Sullivan I knew." The line went dead before Emma could respond, leaving her with the distinct impression that she'd just been used as bait in a trap whose parameters she didn't understand. She replaced the receiver with a hand that wasn't quite steady, the photograph of Thomas and King still lying on the desk before her. Whatever connected these two men went beyond their military service, beyond the bonds formed in combat. Something personal, something unresolved. And now it had come to Millhaven, threatening the life they'd built here. Emma returned the military records to their folder, but kept the photograph out, studying the faces of the men who had served with her husband. Young men in a desert far from home, bound by experiences she could only imagine. One had become the dedicated physician she'd married. Another had descended into a life of crime and violence. What had happened between them? What debt did Thomas supposedly owe? As darkness fell outside, Emma moved through the house, turning on lights, unwilling to sit in shadows with her thoughts. She tried Thomas's cell phone again, unsurprised when it went straight to voicemail. After the tone, she kept her message brief but urgent. Thomas, it's me. Raymond King is in Millhaven with his motorcycle gang. He says you owe him a debt and he's come to collect. Call me as soon as you get this. Please. She hung up knowing the likelihood of a quick response was slim. If Thomas was truly avoiding King, he might not check his messages at all. Emma made a simple dinner she barely tasted, her mind too occupied with questions that had no answers. As she washed the dishes, she gazed out the kitchen window at the darkened backyard, feeling exposed despite the familiar surroundings. The sudden sound of breaking glass from the living room sent her heart racing. Emma dropped to a crouch behind the kitchen counter, reaching for Walter's revolver in her purse on the counter. Her fingers had just closed around the grip when a voice called out from the darkness. Emma, it's me. Thomas stood in the doorway, blood seeping from a cut on his forehead, his clothes torn and dirty. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the doorframe as Emma rushed to his side. Thomas, what happened? Where have you been? She guided him to a kitchen chair, automatically assessing his injuries with a nurse's precision. No time to explain. We need to leave, now. Thomas's voice was hoarse with exhaustion, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting to see faces pressed against the glass. Pack a bag, just essentials. We have about 10 minutes before they realize I gave them the slip. Thomas, stop. You're not making sense. Who's after you? He gripped her arms, his gaze intense despite his obvious fatigue. Reaper King and the Hellbound Riders. They're not just a motorcycle gang, Emma. They're something much worse, and they've come to Millhaven because of Mayor Mo. Because of a debt, Emma asked, remembering King's words. Thomas's expression darkened. Not the kind of debt you're thinking of. It's not about money. He glanced at the window again, tension radiating from him in palpable waves. Please, Em, I promise I'll explain everything once we're safe, but right now we need to leave this house. The urgency in his voice convinced her where words alone might not have. Emma nodded, moving quickly to their bedroom to pack a small bag with clothes and toiletries. Thomas followed more slowly, retrieving a locked metal case from the back of their closet, a case Emma had never seen before. What is that? She asked, pausing in her packing. Insurance, Thomas replied grimly, tucking the case under his arm. Let's go. They slipped out the back door and across the yard to the garage where Thomas's old Jeep waited. As they pulled onto the street, Emma caught sight of movement in the shadows near their house, the distinctive silhouette of a man watching their departure. Thomas drove with the calm precision of someone accustomed to operating under pressure, taking a circuitous route through Millhaven's residential streets before heading out of town on a little-used Forest Service road. Where are we going? Emma asked, clutching her hastily packed bag on her lap. Somewhere safe, somewhere Reaper won't think to look for us. The answer wasn't much of an explanation, but Emma held her questions for the moment, recognizing the need for Thomas to concentrate on their escape. As the lights of Millhaven receded behind them, she allowed herself to study her husband in the dim glow of the dashboard. The man beside her was still Thomas Sullivan, the physician who treated veterans with the same dedication he brought to every aspect of his life. But now she glimpsed another Thomas beneath the surface, a man who knew how to evade pursuit, who kept locked metal cases hidden in closets, who had connections to people who had chosen very different paths after their military service. A man with secrets she was only beginning to understand. The Forest Service road wound deeper into the mountains, the headlights illuminating dense stands of Douglas fir and pine on either side. After nearly an hour of driving, Thomas turned onto an unmarked dirt track barely wide enough for the Jeep branches scraping against the windows as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. Finally, a small cabin appeared in the headlights, its weathered timber walls blending with the surrounding forest. Thomas parked behind the structure, concealing the Jeep from the access road, and cut the engine. We'll be safe here for now, he said, the first words he had spoken since they left Millhaven. It belongs to Walter, his fishing retreat. He offered it if I ever needed a place to lie low. Emma absorbed this information, adding it to the growing list of revelations about her husband and their life in Millhaven. Walter knows about this, about Reaper King, and whatever's happening. Thomas sighed, the sound weighted with exhaustion and resignation. Walter knows parts of it. I've never told him the whole story. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of determination and regret. But I'm going to tell you everything now. You deserve to know what I've brought to your doorstep. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and familiar, despite the strangeness of their situation. I'm sorry, Em. I never thought the past would catch up with us. Not in Millhaven. Emma squeezed his hand and returned the gesture, automatic after years of partnership. Then let's go inside, and you can start by telling me exactly who Raymond King is to you and why he's come to our town with a motorcycle gang at his back. Thomas nodded, his shoulders straightening as if preparing to carry a heavy load. It started in Desert Storm, but it didn't end there. Reaper King and I have a history that goes beyond our military service, a history written in blood and betrayal. The cabin door creaked as Thomas pushed it open, revealing a simple interior that smelled of pine and wood smoke. As they stepped inside, closing the door on the night and whatever pursued them, Emma felt the foundations of her world shifting beneath her feet. The life she had known was transforming into something unrecognizable, and all she could do was hold on and trust the man she had married to guide them through whatever storm was breaking over their heads. The cabin's interior was Spartan, but comfortable, its single room containing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and a bed tucked into the corner. Thomas moved with practiced efficiency, checking windows and securing the door before lighting a kerosene lamp that cast warm amber light across rough-hewn walls. Walter comes up here to fish and forget the world exists, he explained, setting his locked metal case on the rustic dining table. No electricity, no phone, just peace and quiet. Emma sank into a chair, the events of the day catching up to her all at once. No phone means no way to call for help if we need it. That's partly the point. Thomas knelt before the fireplace, arranging kindling and logs from the neatly stacked pile beside the hearth. If we can't call out, no one can trace us here. Reaper's resources are considerable, but even he can't find what he can't track. The flames caught quickly, sending flickering light and welcome warmth through the cabin. Thomas stood wincing slightly as the movement pulled at whatever injuries he'd sustained. "Let me look at that cut," Emma said, her nurse's instincts overriding everything else for the moment. She rummaged through her hastily packed bag, finding the small first aid kit she always carried. Thomas submitted to her ministrations with the patience of someone accustomed to being on both sides of medical care. The cut on his forehead wasn't deep, but like all head wounds, it had bled profusely. Emma cleaned it gently, applying butterfly closures with practiced fingers. "Anywhere else?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Thomas hesitated, then lifted his shirt to reveal an angry purple bruise spreading across his ribs on the left side. Emma probed the area with gentle but thorough pressure, assessing the damage with professional detachment, despite the fact that this was her husband's body beneath her hands. "2 cracked ribs, I'd guess. Nothing displaced." She sat back, fixing him with the stern gaze she reserved for difficult patients. "Now tell me what happened. The truth, Thomas. All of it." He nodded, lowering his shirt and moving to sit across from her at the table. In the lamplight, the lines around his eyes seemed deeper, his face carrying the weight of whatever he had been carrying alone. "I wasn't in Portland." The admission came quietly, the first truth of many to follow. "I was tracking Reaper and his gang, trying to determine their intentions and prepare for what I knew was coming." "How did you even know they were headed to Millhaven?" "I still have contacts from my Army days. One of them works in federal law enforcement, now monitoring gang activity across state lines. He called me 3 days ago to warn me that the hellbound riders were moving north, following a very specific route that could only lead to Millhaven." Thomas's eyes held hers steady despite the pain evident in his posture. "They were coming for me, Em. And through me, for you." Emma absorbed this, the implications sending a chill through her that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Because of whatever happened in Desert Storm. Thomas reached for the metal case, entering a combination into its lock with practiced movements. The case opened to reveal documents, photographs, and a sealed envelope with military markings. It started in Desert Storm, but it didn't end there. He began selecting a photograph and sliding it across the table to her. The image showed a younger Thomas in desert camouflage, standing beside a military ambulance with several other men, including Raymond King. They were dusty, tired, but smiling with the camaraderie of those who had faced danger together and survived. The 44th Medical Brigade was assigned to support combat operations during the ground offensive. I was a combat medic attached to a forward surgical team. Reaper Raymond King was our security specialist. His job was to protect the medical personnel and secure the routes for medical evacuations. Thomas selected another document, this one an official military report with sections blacked out. What you need to understand about Reaper is that he was good at his job. Extraordinarily good. He had an instinct for danger, could read terrain and threats like most people read road signs. He saved our lives more than once, leading us safely through areas that should have been death traps. So what went wrong? How does someone go from decorated soldier to motorcycle gang leader? Thomas's expression darkened. Ambition, opportunity, moral compromise. When you're deployed in a war zone, especially one like Desert Storm, there are opportunities for profit if you are willing to look the other way. Black market goods, contraband, sometimes even weapons. And Reaper took advantage. Not at first, but he started making connections with local operators, people who moved goods through the chaos of war. Small stuff initially, cigarettes, alcohol, things soldiers wanted that were hard to get through official channels. Then it escalated. Thomas pulled out another document, this one a military police report. By 1992, he was involved in drug trafficking on base. When he was caught, he received a dishonorable discharge. But that was just the visible part of his operation. What didn't make it into the official reports was much worse. Emma studied her husband's face, seeing pain and old regret etched in the lines around his eyes. You testified against him. I did. I had to. He was endangering lives, compromising medical operations for his own profit. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Emma had seen countless times in their marriage. What I didn't know at the time was how deep his network went, or how many powerful people had a vested interest in his activities continuing. So he blamed you for his discharge. That's only part of it. Thomas's voice dropped lower, the words seeming to cost him physical effort. The last mission we ran together, things went very wrong. We were ambushed. 3 of our team were killed, including Robert Chen. Emma remembered the name from the photograph. Any relation to the teenager in the hospital? His nephew. Michael Chen's father moved to Millhaven after his brother was killed, wanting a quiet place to raise his family away from the memories. Thomas's hands clenched into fists on the table. Reaper always claimed I set them up, that I betrayed the team to cover up my own involvement in his operations. That's ridiculous. Anyone who knows you would know that's a lie. In war, truth is often the first casualty. Thomas opened the sealed envelope, removing a small flash drive. This contains evidence I've collected over the years. Evidence that Reaper was working with Iraqi intelligence officers to smuggle classified information Shaw out of the theater in exchange for protection of his drug routes. Evidence that he sacrificed our team to protect his operation. Emma stared at the small device that had apparently been worth endangering their lives. Why didn't you turn this over to authorities? Because until recently, I couldn't prove the connection to Reaper conclusively. Because some of the people implicated in this have risen to positions of significant power. And because I hoped foolishly that the past would stay buried. Thomas's eyes met hers, regret evident in their depths. I was wrong. When Reaper formed the Hellbound Riders after his discharge, he built it on the connections he'd made during the war. It's not just a motorcycle gang, Emma. It's a sophisticated criminal enterprise involved in drugs, weapons, and information trafficking. And now he's brought it to our doorstep. Emma tried to process everything she was hearing, reconciling this new reality with the life she'd thought they were living. Why now? It's been decades since Desert Storm. Because of this. Thomas held up the flash drive. 6 months ago, I received a package from Michael Foster, another member of our team who survived the ambush. He'd been investigating Reaper's activities on his own, gathering evidence. A week after he sent me this, he was found dead in his apartment. Official ruling was suicide, but you don't believe that? Not for a second. Thomas's voice hardened. Foster knew too much had gotten too close to the truth. With this evidence combined with what I've collected over the years, there's enough to bring down not just Reaper, but the entire network he's built. Emma reached across the table to take his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and strength that had always represented safety to her. Now they seemed like small protection against the forces arrayed against them. So what do we do now? My contact in the FBI is arranging a secure transfer of the evidence, but it will take time. Until then, we need to stay hidden, stay safe. Thomas squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to drag you into this. I'm your wife. Where else would I be? The question was rhetorical, her commitment absolute despite the revelations of the night. Thomas looked as if he might say more, but a sound from outside froze them both, the distant but unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines. That's impossible, Thomas whispered, rising to douse the lamp. No one knew we were coming here. The cabin plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the dying fireplace embers. Thomas moved to the window, staying to the side as he peered out into the night. Emma joined him, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. In the distance, headlights wound up the mountain road, not the Forest Service route they had taken, but the main road that passed within a half-mile of the cabin. Could be coincidence, Emma suggested, not believing it herself. Campers, maybe. Thomas shook his head. Not this time of year, not on that road. He moved quickly, gathering their essential belongings. We need to leave. Now. If they're searching this area, it's only a matter of time before they find the cabin. How could they know, Thomas? We told no one. Thomas's expression was grim in the fading firelight. Because someone in Millhaven is working with Reaper. Someone who knows about Walter's cabin. The implication sent a chill through Emma's veins. Their small town, the community they'd thought of as family, harbored a traitor. And now that betrayal had placed them directly in Reaper's path, they slipped out of the cabin into the cold mountain night, moving through the trees with only the faint moonlight to guide them. Thomas led the way with the confident stride of someone who had navigated far more dangerous terrain, under worse conditions, the metal case containing the evidence secured in a backpack. Where are we going? Emma whispered, picking her way carefully over the uneven ground. Her nurse's shoes were practical, but not designed for hiking through mountain forests at night. There's an old fire lookout tower about 3 miles north, Thomas replied, his voice barely audible above the wind in the pines. Abandoned now, but still solid. We can shelter there until morning. The distant sound of motorcycles had faded, but neither of them relaxed their vigilance. If Reaper's men were searching the area, they could reappear at any moment. They had covered perhaps a mile when Emma noticed Thomas's pace slowing, his breathing becoming labored. The cracked ribs were taking their toll, each step on the uneven ground, jarring his injured torso. We need to rest, she said, touching his arm. No time. But even as he spoke, Thomas stumbled, catching himself against a tree trunk with a barely suppressed groan of pain. 5 minutes, Emma insisted, using her professional voice that brooked no argument. You're no good to either of us if you collapse. Thomas relented, sinking onto a fallen log, while Emma checked his ribs again. The bruising had darkened, spreading across his side in a mottle of purple and blue. She wished for proper medical supplies for the security of her ER, rather than this desperate flight through dark woods. I should have told you everything years ago, Thomas said quietly, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Given you the choice to walk away before it came to this. Emma looked up from her examination, moonlight catching in her eyes. Do you really think I would have chosen differently? Before he could answer, a new sound cut through the night, the distinctive whop-whop of helicopter rotors, still distant but approaching. That's no search and rescue chopper, Thomas said grimly, rising to his feet with renewed urgency. Reapers pulling out all the stops. They moved faster now, despite Thomas's injury, the sound of the helicopter providing motivation that overwhelmed physical pain. The terrain grew steeper, climbing toward the ridge where the fire tower supposedly waited. Emma's mind raced as they climbed, processing everything Thomas had revealed. Their quiet life in Millhaven had been built on a foundation of secrets and unresolved danger. Yet even as part of her wanted to be angry at the deception, she understood Thomas's desire to protect her, to create a safe haven far from the shadows of his past. The helicopter drew closer, its searchlight sweeping across the forest below them in broad strokes of harsh white light. They pressed themselves against the trunk of a massive Douglas fir as the beam passed nearby, holding their breath until darkness returned. Almost there, Thomas whispered, pointing toward a dark silhouette rising from the ridgeline ahead. The fire lookout tower stood like a sentinel against the night sky, its weathered frame a promise of temporary sanctuary. They had just started moving again when the helicopter changed direction, banking sharply and heading directly toward their position. Seconds later, the searchlight pinned them in its unforgiving glare. Run! Thomas pushed Emma ahead of him toward the tower that now seemed impossibly far away. They crashed through underbrush and scrambled over rocks, the helicopter hovering above like a predatory bird, its light never leaving them. Over the roar of the rotors, Emma heard the sound that confirmed her worst fears, motorcycle engines growing louder as Reaper's ground team converged on their location. The tower loomed before them, a steep staircase leading up to the observation platform 30 feet above the ground. Thomas urged her ahead, following more slowly as his injured body rebelled against the punishing climb. Inside the lookout platform was dusty but intact, offering 360-degree views of the surrounding forest, and more importantly, a defendable position. Thomas secured the trap door through which they had entered, then moved to the windows, assessing their situation with the calm evaluation of someone trained for combat. 6 bikes, he reported, watching as headlights converged at the base of the tower. Plus the helicopter. They're not taking any chances. Emma joined him at the window, seeing the dark figures of Reaper's men spreading out around the tower's base. The helicopter hovered nearby, its searchlights still trained on the platform. What do they want, Thomas? Just the evidence. Thomas's expression was grim in the harsh light from above. That's part of it. But Reaper's never been the forgiving type. He wants revenge for what he perceives as my betrayal, and he's not particular about who gets hurt in the process. A voice boomed through a bullhorn from below, cutting through the night with chilling clarity. Thomas Sullivan, we know you're up there. You and your lovely wife. Raymond King's voice carried the confidence of someone who held all the cards. Come down now, hand over what you took, and perhaps we can work something out that doesn't end with both of you taking a long fall. Thomas turned to Emma, his expression resolute. Stay here. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, don't come down. What are you going to do? He withdrew Walter's revolver from his jacket pocket. Buy us some time. My FBI contact should be in Millhaven by now looking for us. If we can hold out until morning, there's a chance. Thomas, no. They'll kill you the moment you step outside. Reaper wants the evidence more than he wants me dead. He'll negotiate. Thomas checked the revolver cylinder, confirming it was fully loaded. It's our only play, Em. Emma gripped his arm, desperation in her voice. There has to be another way. Thomas looked at her with such tenderness that for a moment the danger surrounding them seemed to recede. I led them to you. To our home. I won't let you pay the price for my past. Before she could respond, the trapdoor exploded upward, wood splintering as someone fired at the hinges from below. Thomas shoved Emma behind him, raising the revolver as a figure emerged through the opening. Now, Thomas, is that any way to greet an old friend, Raymond? King pulled himself up into the lookout platform with surprising agility for a man his size. He wore the same leather vest emblazoned with the Hellbound Rider's emblem, but now Emma could see the military bearing beneath the biker persona, the disciplined movement and calculated assessment of the man who had once protected medical personnel in a war zone. That's far enough, Reaper, Thomas said, the revolver steady in his hand despite his injuries. King smiled, spreading his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. After all these years, that's your greeting. And here I thought the army taught better manners. His gaze shifted to Emma. Mrs. Sullivan. A pleasure to meet you properly at last. Your husband has been very protective of you, almost as if he feared what might happen if our paths crossed. What do you want? Emma asked, finding her voice despite the fear constricting her throat. Just what belongs to me. The evidence your husband has been collecting. The flash drive from Foster. King's smile never reached his eyes. Did he tell you what's on it? Did he explain that it's not just about me, but about people in positions that make me look like a small-time operator? He told me enough, Emma replied, moving to stand beside Thomas rather than behind him. He told me you betrayed your team, that people died because of you. King's expression hardened. He always was good at telling his version of events. Did he mention that he was the one who chose the route that day? That he had access to the intelligence reports warning of enemy activity in that sector? That after the ambush, he was the only one without a scratch? That's a lie, Thomas said, his voice cold with suppressed fury. You set us up. You sacrificed your own team to protect your smuggling operation. And you've spent decades trying to prove it. Quite the dedicated crusader. King took a step closer, ignoring the revolver pointed at his chest. But that ends tonight. The evidence, Thomas. All of it. Or this gets very unpleasant for your lovely wife. Thomas glanced at Emma, a silent communication passing between them. Then he slowly lowered the revolver. It's in my backpack, but I want your word that Emma walks away from this. She has nothing to do with what happened between us. King chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. Thomas Sullivan's still trying to make deals when he has no leverage. Your wife became involved the moment you married her, but I'm not unreasonable. Give me what I want, and perhaps she doesn't have to suffer for your mistakes. The threat hung in the air between them, clear, despite the diplomatic phrasing. Thomas reached slowly for the backpack, maintaining eye contact with King as he withdrew the metal case. Everything I have is in here. All the evidence, all the connections, names, dates, account numbers. He held the case out, his expression unreadable. It's yours, just let Emma go. King reached for the case, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. You always did have a weakness for innocence, Thomas. It's what made you so predictable. As King's fingers closed around the handle, the lookout platform suddenly blazed with light from multiple directions. The helicopter that had been hovering nearby banked sharply its searchlight, revealing dark figures moving through the trees below, but not the leather-clad hellbound riders. FBI, Raymond King, you are surrounded. Put down any weapons and place your hands on your head. The amplified voice came not from King's men, but from the newcomers now surrounding the tower. Through the windows, Emma could see tactical teams in FBI jackets moving into position, their weapons trained on the bikers, who now found themselves outmaneuvered. King's expression transformed from triumph to rage in an instant. He lunged for Thomas, one massive hand closing around his throat while the other reached inside his vest. If I'm going down, you're coming with me, he snarled, producing a compact pistol from a hidden holster. Emma reacted without conscious thought, driving her shoulder into King's side with all the force she could muster. The unexpected attack caught him off balance, sending both the gun and the metal case clattering across the wooden floor. Thomas recovered quickly, landing a precise strike to King's solar plexus despite his injured ribs. The big man doubled over, gasping for breath, as Thomas retrieved both the gun and the case. It's over, Reaper, Thomas said, his voice steady despite the violence of the moment. The FBI has everything they need. Foster made copies before he sent me the drive. His suicide guaranteed that multiple federal agencies received the evidence. King straightened slowly, his eyes burning with hatred. You think this is over. You have no idea the reach of the people I work with. There is no hole deep enough for you to hide in, no place far enough to escape what's coming for you both. The trapdoor burst open again, this time revealing the stern face of an FBI agent in full tactical gear. Raymond King, you're under arrest. Hands where I can see them. King complied with the cold calculation of someone already planning his next move. As agents swarmed the platform and secured him with handcuffs, his gaze remained fixed on Thomas and Emma. This isn't the end, he said softly, the words meant only for them. Not by a long shot. The agents led King away, the metal case containing the evidence secured as crucial to their ongoing investigation. Thomas and Emma stood side by side in the now crowded lookout tower, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly giving way to exhausted relief. Agent Daniel Crawford Thomas's contact from the FBI approached them with an expression of professional concern. You two all right? Medical team standing by if you need attention? Thomas nodded, his arm around Emma's shoulders. We'll be fine. Did you get all of them? All the hellbound riders at the scene, yes, but this is bigger than just King and his gang. The evidence you've provided implicates people in multiple federal agencies, defense contractors, even a couple of congressmen. Crawford lowered his voice. Which means you're both still in danger until we can roll up the entire network. Witness protection, Thomas asked, his grip on Emma tightening slightly. For now, yes. We'll need to debrief you both. Get your statements on record and then set you up with new identities somewhere safe. Crawford glanced at Emma. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Emma looked up at Thomas, seeing the guilt and regret in his eyes, but also the unwavering love that had defined their marriage. Actually, she said, I signed up for better or worse. This definitely qualifies as worse, but we'll face it together. Thomas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, she agreed with a tired smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. As they descended from the tower, guided by FBI agents through the pre-dawn darkness, Emma realized that the life they had built in Millhaven was over. Their home, their careers, their friends, all would have to be left behind. Yet as Thomas's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with the familiar strength that had always been her anchor, she knew that what mattered most remained intact. They had survived Reaper's revenge, at least this first assault. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything in their decade together, side by side, stronger together than apart. The FBI safe house outside Portland was a nondescript suburban home with reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and surveillance systems disguised as ordinary landscaping features. From the street, it appeared no different from any other middle-class residence in the quiet neighborhood. Inside, it was a fortress. Emma sat at the kitchen table, a mug of cooling coffee between her hands as she listened to Thomas's debriefing in the adjacent room. 3 days had passed since their rescue from the fire lookout tower, 3 days of statements and questions and growing uncertainty about what would come next. Agent Crawford entered the kitchen pouring himself coffee before taking the seat across from her. "Your husband is remarkably thorough," he commented. "The documentation he's provided spans nearly 30 years. "Thomas has always been methodical," Emma replied, studying Crawford's face for clues about their future. "What happens now? Now we move you both somewhere safe while we build our case. New names, new backgrounds, new careers if necessary. And Millhaven? Our home?" Crawford's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan. Going back isn't an option, not until every person involved in King's network is behind bars. Even then, there would be risks." The reality Emma had been avoiding settled over her like a physical weight. Their life in Millhaven was gone possibly forever. Betty, Walter, the hospital, their home, all sacrificed to the ghosts of Thomas's past. "There's something else you should know," Crawford said, his tone shifting to one of careful neutrality. "The blood work we ran when you were both examined after the rescue. Standard procedure in witness protection cases." Emma tensed, suddenly alert to the undercurrent in Crawford's voice. "Congratulations are in order, apparently. You're approximately 10 weeks pregnant." The words hit Emma like a physical blow, unexpected and momentous. In the chaos of the past days, she hadn't connected her mild nausea and fatigue to anything beyond stress and disrupted sleep. "Pregnant?" She repeated the words strange on her tongue. "Are you certain?" Crawford nodded. "The medical team confirmed it yesterday. I assumed you'd want to tell your husband yourself." Emma placed a protective hand over her abdomen, emotions warring within her. Joy at the child she and Thomas had discussed, but never found the right time for. Fear at bringing a baby into the dangerous situation they now faced. Determination that this child would know safety and stability, whatever it took. "I'll tell him," she said, rising from the table. "Thank you." Crawford nodded, understanding her need for privacy. "Take all the time you need. We won't be moving you for at least another day." Emma found Thomas in the small bedroom they had been assigned, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked up as she entered, fatigue evident in every line of his face. "Hey," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "You okay?" She sat beside him, their shoulders touching, in the comfortable familiarity of long partnership. "I just spoke with Crawford. He had some news." Thomas tensed, prepared for more complications, more danger. "What now?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung between them, monumental in their simplicity. Thomas stared at her, shock giving way to wonder, then to a joy so profound it transformed his exhausted features. "Pregnant, you're sure?" Emma nodded, tears welling despite her effort to maintain composure. "About 10 weeks according to their tests. Our anniversary weekend, probably." Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her with a tenderness that belied his strength. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." For a moment, they allowed themselves to simply experience the joy of this new life, this unexpected gift amidst the chaos of their circumstances. Then reality reasserted itself, the weight of their situation impossible to ignore for long. "What kind of parents bring a child into witness protection?" Emma asked, voicing the fear that had gripped her since Crawford's revelation. "What kind of life is that for a family?" Thomas cradled her face in his hands, his gaze steady and certain. "The kind who will do anything to protect their child. The kind who face the truth together, no matter how difficult." His hand moved to rest gently over hers on her abdomen. "This changes everything, Em, but it doesn't change who we are or what we mean to each other." Emma leaned into his strength, drawing comfort from the unwavering support that had defined their marriage from the beginning. "I need to tell Walter," she said after a moment. "And Betty, they should know we're safe, that we didn't just abandon them." Crawford said no contact with anyone from Millhaven. "Too risky. Their family, Thomas. The only family we have left now." Thomas was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks against Emma's need for closure. "I'll speak to Crawford. Maybe there's a secure way to send a message just to let them know we're alive and safe. No details, nothing that could be traced." Emma nodded, knowing it was the most they could hope for under the circumstances. The world they had built together in Millhaven was gone sacrificed to the shadows of the past. Yet as Thomas's arms encircled her, his heartbeat steady against her cheek, she felt the first stirrings of hope for the future, a future that now included not just the two of them, but the new life growing within her. Their child would never know. Millhaven would never meet the people who had been like family to them. But he or she would know the truth, would understand the sacrifices made and the love that had sustained them through the darkest of times. In the uncertain days ahead, that knowledge would have to be enough. 3 months passed with the glacial slowness that only enforced confinement can produce. The FBI had relocated Thomas and Emma to a small town in northern Michigan, far from the mountains of Oregon and the life they had built in Millhaven. Here they became David and Sarah Williams, a physician and nurse practitioner, setting up a new practice after relocating from Seattle. Their new home was pleasant enough, a craftsman bungalow on a quiet street lined with sugar maples that blazed with autumn color. The local hospital had welcomed Thomas with open arms, desperate for experienced physicians willing to serve their rural community. Emma, now showing the gentle curve of pregnancy at 5 months, had been offered a position that would start after the baby arrived. On the surface, they were adjusting well. Beneath the strain of constant vigilance wore at them both. Emma stood at the kitchen window, watching the first snow of the season dust their unfamiliar yard with crystalline white. Her hand rested on her growing belly, feeling the occasional flutter of movement from the child within. A girl according to the ultrasound they had had the previous week. A daughter who would be born into a life of secrets and assumed identities. Thomas entered quietly, placing a cup of herbal tea on the counter beside her. Since learning of the pregnancy, he had become even more protective, researching everything from prenatal nutrition to infant sleep patterns with the same thoroughness he brought to his medical practice. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind his hands, joining hers over their growing child. "Just wondering what we'll tell her," Emma replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "About who we are, where we came from. Why she'll never know her grandmother or meet Walter." Thomas rested his chin on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. "We'll tell her the truth when she's old enough to understand. That her parents stood up for what was right, even when it cost them everything. And in the meantime, we live a lie." Emma hadn't meant the words to sound so bitter, but pregnancy hormones had stripped away her usual filters. "Not everything is a lie," Thomas said gently. "Not what matters most." Before Emma could respond, the doorbell rang, startling them both. Visitors were rare in their new life, carefully screened, and usually limited to their FBI handler, who checked in weekly. Thomas moved to the front window, peering through the curtains with the caution that had become second nature. "It's Crawford," he said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Emma remained in the kitchen as Thomas went to admit their FBI contact. She had come to respect Agent Crawford's professionalism and genuine concern for their well-being, but his visits inevitably brought reminders of the danger that still shadowed their lives. Crawford entered, removing his snow-dusted overcoat and declining Thomas's offer of coffee with a shake of his head. His expression was grave, the lines around his eyes deeper than Emma remembered from his last visit. "We have a situation," he said without preamble, placing his briefcase on the dining table and withdrawing a file folder. "Raymond King escaped federal custody during transport 3 days ago." The news hit Emma like a physical blow, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "How is that possible? You said he was being held in a maximum security facility." "He had help," Crawford replied, opening the folder to reveal photographs of a transport van, its doors open, bodies visible on the ground beside it. 2 marshals dead, 1 critically injured. Professional hit, highly coordinated. King had to have had assistance from someone with significant resources and inside information. Thomas's expression had hardened into the focused intensity Emma recognized from crisis situations in the ER. "You think he's coming for us?" It wasn't a question, but Crawford nodded anyway. "We have to assume so. His network has been severely damaged by our investigation, but not destroyed. He still has allies, people with resources and motivation to help him. So we move again," Emma said, resignation heavy in her voice. "Another home abandoned, another identity discarded, another community left behind." "Not immediately," Crawford replied, surprising them both. "King doesn't know your current location or identities. Moving you now might actually increase the risk of exposure. For the moment, the safest course is to maintain your cover and increase security." What does that mean exactly? Thomas asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Protective detail round the clock, agents posing as new neighbors in the house next door, panic buttons, upgraded security system, daily check-ins. Crawford's gaze shifted to Emma. I understand this is especially difficult given your condition, Mrs. Sullivan. If you prefer to relocate, we can make those arrangements. Emma exchanged a glance with Thomas, unspoken communication passing between them. The thought of moving again, of starting over in yet another unfamiliar place while her pregnancy advanced, was exhausting. But the alternative was to remain where they were, knowing that Reaper King was free and undoubtedly hunting them. We stay, she decided, her voice steadier than she felt. At least until after the baby comes. I can't face another move right now. Crawford nodded, respect evident in his expression. We'll make this location as secure as possible. Agent Martinez will be your primary contact on the protective detail. She'll be introducing herself as your new neighbor within the hour. As Crawford outlined the security measures being implemented, Emma found her mind drifting back to Millhaven, to Betty's place with its chrome counters and red vinyl booths, to Walter's steady presence in the ER, his wisdom guiding her through difficult cases, to the life she and Thomas had built there, the future they had planned. All gone now, sacrificed to the shadows of a past that refused to stay buried. There's one more thing, Crawford said, his tone shifting slightly. We've identified a potential source of the leak that led to King's escape. Someone with access to the transport schedule and route, someone who had reason to know the details of your case. Thomas tensed beside her. Who done it, Dr. Walter Montgomery? The name hung in the air between them, impossible and devastating. Walter, who had been mentor and father figure to them both. Walter, who had offered his cabin as sanctuary when danger threatened. Walter, who had guided Emma through her early days as a nurse and celebrated when she and Thomas married. That's impossible, Thomas said, voicing Emma's own stunned denial. Walter has no connection to Reaper or his organization. He's been in Millhaven for decades. Crawford slid a photograph across the table. Walter, younger but unmistakable in army uniform, standing beside a group of men. One of them was Raymond King, both decades younger than when they had known him. Dr. Montgomery served in Korea, as he's told you many times, Crawford explained. What he didn't mention is that after Korea, he was recruited by military intelligence. He worked with special operations units, including training medics for covert missions. One of his students was Raymond King. Emma stared at the photograph, unable to reconcile the Walter she knew with this new information. That doesn't mean he's working with Reaper now. It was decades ago. We've been monitoring all communications from Millhaven since your extraction. Crawford continued, his voice gentle but unyielding. 2 days before King's escape, Dr. Montgomery made a call to a number associated with known associates of the Hellbound Riders. The conversation was coded, but our analysts believe he was passing information about King's transport. Why? Thomas asked, the single word laden with betrayal. Why would Walter do this? Crawford closed the folder, his expression somber. That's what we're trying to determine. Montgomery has been brought in for questioning, but he's not cooperating. Whatever his motivation, the fact remains that King is free, and Montgomery appears to have helped make that happen. Emma sank into a chair, one hand protectively covering her abdomen as the other gripped the edge of the table. Walter, who had been like a father to her, had betrayed them, had potentially placed them and their unborn child in mortal danger. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, leaving her breathless with its implications. Thomas moved to her side, his hand warm and steady on her shoulder. What happens now? We continue building our case against King's organization. We try to recapture him before he can reach you, and we keep you both safe until this is over. Crawford gathered his materials, preparing to leave. Agent Martinez will be here soon to go over the security protocols. In the meantime, continue your normal routines. Any deviation might signal that something has changed. After Crawford left, Emma and Thomas sat in silence, the weight of this new betrayal settling between them. Outside, snow continued to fall, transforming their borrowed landscape into something alien and pristine. I can't believe Walter would do this, Emma said finally, her voice small in the quiet house. Thomas knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. Neither can I. Which means there has to be more to the story than Crawford knows. Walter Montgomery is many things, but he's not a traitor. Then why would he contact Reaper's associates? Why help him escape? I don't know. Thomas admitted, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. But I intend to find out. Emma recognized the determination in his voice, the same resolve that had driven him to collect evidence against Reaper for decades. How we can't exactly call and ask him. Thomas's expression shifted determination, giving way to something more calculating. No, but we can access the FBI's information on his questioning. Crawford's team has been monitoring all electronic communications in and out of Millhaven. There might be something there that explains his actions. You want to hack into FBI files? Emma couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Thomas, that's necessary, he finished for her. If Walter is involved, there's a reason, a good reason. I need to know what it is. Emma studied her husband's face, seeing past the mild-mannered physician to the combat medic who had survived war zones and protected his team at any cost. This was the Thomas Sullivan that Reaper King had known, the man who would stop at nothing to protect what he valued. Be careful, she said, finally knowing she couldn't dissuade him. We have more than just ourselves to protect now. Thomas placed a gentle hand on her rounded abdomen, feeling the subtle movement of their daughter beneath. Everything I do is for her, for both of you. I promise. As twilight deepened outside their borrowed home, Emma wondered what other secrets might surface before this ordeal ended. What other betrayals might be revealed, what other sacrifices demanded of them. Whatever came, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she and Thomas would face it together, their bond strengthened rather than weakened by the trials they had endured. And perhaps when this was finally over, they could build a life for their daughter free from the shadows of the past, a life where devils no longer hunted angels. Agent Elena Martinez proved to be a blessing disguised as a neighbor. Competent, discreet, and genuinely warm, she integrated herself into their lives with remarkable ease. To the outside world, she was a freelance graphic designer who worked from home, explaining her constant presence in irregular hours. To Thomas and Emma, she was their lifeline, the shield between them and the danger that lurked beyond their peaceful Michigan town. 2 weeks after Crawford's devastating revelation about Walter, Emma sat in the nursery they had prepared, folding tiny clothes with the careful precision she had once applied to surgical trays. The room was coming together nicely, painted a soft mint green with a border of woodland creatures along the ceiling. A cherry wood crib, changing table, and rocking chair completed the essential furniture, creating a sanctuary for the child who would arrive in less than 4 months. The doorbell rang, followed by Martinez's voice calling a greeting as she let herself in with the key they had provided. Emma continued folding, knowing Thomas would meet their guardian at the door. These afternoon check-ins had become part of their routine, a moment to exchange information and assess any potential threats. When Thomas appeared in the nursery doorway, his expression stopped. Emma's hands mid-fold. What is it? Crawford is here, Thomas said, his voice carefully neutral. He has news about Walter. Emma set aside the onesie she had been folding, smoothing her hand over her rounded abdomen in an unconscious gesture of protection before rising to join her husband. Agent Crawford waited in their living room, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and his tie was slightly askew, small tells that spoke volumes to Emma's trained observation. Mrs. Sullivan, he greeted her with a nod. Please sit down. Emma lowered herself into the armchair, Thomas taking a protective position beside her. What's happened? Crawford removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose before replacing them. Doctor, Montgomery escaped custody yesterday during a medical transfer. He claimed chest pain, was transported to a local hospital for evaluation, and managed to overpower the guard assigned to him. Walter is 70 years old with the arthritis in both hands, Thomas said, disbelief evident in his tone. How exactly did he overpower anyone? That's the interesting part, Crawford replied. He had help from inside the hospital. Emma leaned forward, her attention sharpening. What kind of help? A nurse creating a distraction, a maintenance worker who provided access to a service elevator, a doctor who falsified records to buy him time. Crawford's gaze was steady as he delivered the final revelation. All former military personnel, all with connections to a very specific operation from Desert Storm. Thomas went completely still, the kind of stillness that precedes explosive action. Operation Sandviper, Crawford nodded. You know it. I was part of it. Medical support for a covert mission to extract an intelligence asset from Iraqi territory. Thomas's voice had taken on a distant quality, as if he were speaking from across decades rather than mere feet. The mission went wrong. We lost people. Good people. Including Robert Chen, Emma added, remembering the photograph Thomas had shown her. According to our intelligence analysts, Operation Sandviper was compromised from within. Crawford continued. Someone sold out the team, resulting in an ambush that killed 3 operatives and nearly cost the lives of several others, including you, Dr. Sullivan. Reaper always claimed it was me, Thomas said quietly, that I betrayed the team to cover my own involvement in his drug operation. But you've maintained it was King himself who betrayed the mission. Because that's the truth. I spent decades collecting evidence to prove it. Crawford leaned forward, his expression intent. What if you were both wrong? What if the betrayal came from higher up the chain of command? The implication hung in the air between them, monumental in its simplicity. Walter, Emma whispered, pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. Walter was involved with the operation. He trained Reaper. Crawford nodded. Montgomery wasn't just a medical trainer. He was a key intelligence officer involved in planning Operation Sandviper. He had access to all mission parameters, including extraction, routes, and timetables. No. Thomas shook his head, denial immediate and visceral. Walter wouldn't betray his own people. Not for money, not for anything. What if he didn't see it as betrayal? Crawford asked quietly. What if he believed he was protecting something more important than individual lives? The question silenced Thomas momentarily, his medical mind processing possibilities with clinical detachment despite the personal stakes. You found something, he said finally. Something that changes the narrative. Crawford reached into his briefcase, removing a file with top secret stamped across its cover in faded red ink. This was declassified last week as part of our investigation. Operation Sandviper had a secondary objective, one known only to a handful of people at the highest levels. The intelligence asset being extracted wasn't just valuable for his knowledge of Iraqi military movements. He opened the file, revealing photographs and documents that Emma couldn't quite see from her position. Thomas leaned forward, scanning the contents with increasing tension evident in his posture. He was a biologist, Thomas said, his voice hollow with realization, working on a biological weapons program. Crawford nodded. Dr. Mahmoud Farhi, one of Iraq's leading microbiologists. He had agreed to defect, bringing with him samples and documentation of a weaponized hemorrhagic fever virus being developed under Saddam Hussein's regime. The virus was to be the primary focus of the extraction. Dr. Farhi was secondary. And the samples were never recovered. Thomas guessed the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Officially, they were destroyed in the ambush. Crawford's expression suggested he believed otherwise. Unofficially, various intelligence agencies have been searching for them ever since, including some organizations that operate outside normal channels. Emma looked between the two men, following the implications to their logical conclusion. You think Walter betrayed the mission to prevent the virus from being brought back to the United States? It's a working theory, Crawford admitted, one that explains why he might help King escape now. If King knows where those samples ended up, if he's been using that knowledge as leverage all these years, Walter would do whatever it took to contain a biological threat. Thomas finished, certainty replacing confusion in his voice. Even if it meant sacrificing his own people, even if it meant being labeled a traitor. Crawford closed the file, his expression grim. The question is, what happens now? King is free. Montgomery is free. And both of them may be searching for biological weapons that have been missing for over 30 years. The implications were staggering, extending far beyond their personal safety to potentially global consequences. Emma felt the baby shift within her, a tangible reminder of the future they were fighting to protect. We need to find Walter, she said, surprising herself with the clarity of her conviction. Before King does. Thomas turned to her, concern evident in his expression. Em, you're 6 months pregnant. We're in witness protection. We can't exactly launch our own investigation. We don't have to. Emma looked to Crawford, reading the reluctant agreement in his eyes. The FBI can find Walter, and when they do, we need to be there. He'll talk to us. He trusts us. Crawford considered for a long moment before nodding slowly. It's irregular, against protocol, but given the circumstances, having you present when we locate Montgomery might be our best chance at resolving this without further bloodshed. And the virus samples, Thomas asked, if they still exist, if King knows where they are, then we find them first. Crawford replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Whatever it takes. As Crawford departed to make the necessary arrangements, Emma and Thomas remained in the living room, the weight of these new revelations settling between them. Their sanctuary in Michigan had been temporary at best, an illusion of normalcy in lives that had been irrevocably altered by secrets decades in the making. I should have known, Thomas said quietly, staring at his hands. About Walter, about the real purpose of the mission. I was there, I should have seen it. Emma reached for him, her fingers lacing with his. You were a combat medic doing your job, saving lives in a war zone. Whatever Walter did, whatever his reasons, that's not on you. Thomas raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. When this is over, when King is back in custody and the virus secured, I want us to start fresh. No more secrets, no more looking over our shoulders, just us and our daughter building a life together. I'd like that, Emma said softly, allowing herself to imagine a future beyond the danger that currently defined their existence. A future where their daughter could grow up without fear, where they could reclaim some version of the life they had lost. As twilight settled over their borrowed home, Emma felt the first stirrings of hope beneath the weight of uncertainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their bond strengthened, rather than weakened by the trials they had endured. And perhaps when this was finally over, they could build a life free from the shadows of the past. A life where devils no longer hunted angels. The abandoned pharmaceutical research facility stood isolated at the end of a winding access road, its modernist architecture incongruous against the dense Oregon forest surrounding it. Closed during a corporate merger 5 years earlier, its remote location and specialized infrastructure had made it perfect for Walter's purposes. Emma watched from the passenger seat of the FBI tactical vehicle as agents established a perimeter around the facility. Thomas sat beside her, his expression set in the focused calm she recognized from their most difficult moments in the ER. In the months since Crawford's revelation about Operation Sandviper, they had been moved 3 times, always one step ahead of Reaper's persistent pursuit. Now finally they had tracked Walter to this forgotten outpost of medical science, guided by intelligence from a network of veterans loyal to the old doctor. According to Crawford's sources, Walter had taken refuge here to protect something of immense value, something he believed worth sacrificing everything for. Thermal imaging confirms 2 individuals inside, Crawford reported, joining them in the vehicle. One matches Montgomery's physical profile, the other is unknown. King, Thomas asked, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. Unlikely. Our intelligence suggests King is still at least 12 hours behind us. More likely it's one of Montgomery's associates from his military days. Emma shifted uncomfortably, her 8-month pregnancy, making even the simplest movements challenging. Against all medical advice and FBI protocol, she had insisted on being present for this confrontation. Walter had been like a father to her, had guided her career and welcomed her into his life. Whatever he had done, whatever his reasons, she needed to hear the truth from his own lips. What's the plan? She asked, one hand resting protectively on her rounded abdomen. Crawford gestured to the tablet displaying the facility's layout. We have the building surrounded, all exits covered. I'm sending in a negotiation team to establish contact with Montgomery, with you 2 in reserve. If he refuses to communicate with my people, we'll consider allowing limited direct contact under controlled conditions. Thomas nodded, his medical training evident in the way he assessed Emma's condition with a quick glance. You should stay in the vehicle. The stress, the potential danger. I'm going in with you, Emma interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. I need to hear him explain. I need to understand. Thomas recognized the determination in her voice, the same resolve that had carried her through months of witness protection without complaint. He simply nodded, knowing better than to argue when Emma had made up her mind. The negotiation team moved in, establishing a secure communications link with those inside the facility. Emma watched through the vehicle's window as the tactical dance unfolded, FBI agents taking positions while maintaining a non-threatening stance. Crawford's radio crackled to life. Sir Dr. Montgomery is requesting to speak with the Sullivans. Says he'll only surrender to them. Crawford exchanged a glance with Thomas and Emma, the question unspoken but clear. Thomas nodded, his decision made. Tell him the Sullivans will meet him inside, Crawford instructed, then turned to Thomas. You'll wear body armor and be wired for sound. 2 tactical agents will accompany you to the main entrance, but only you and Mrs. Sullivan will proceed inside. We'll have snipers covering every window and thermal imaging tracking your positions at all times. And if King arrives, Thomas asked the question that had been hanging between them since they'd located Walter. Then we deal with him, Crawford replied simply, one crisis at a time. The body armor was awkward over Emma's pregnant form, but she accepted it without complaint, understanding its necessity. As they approached the facility's main entrance, flanked by FBI agents in tactical gear, she felt Thomas's hand find hers, squeezing gently in reassurance. The doors opened before they reached them, revealing Walter Montgomery standing in the sterile lobby. He looked older than Emma remembered, his tall frame slightly stooped, his white hair longer and less kempt, but his eyes were the same, sharp and assessing behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Thomas, Emma. His voice carried the same authoritative warmth she remembered from countless shifts in the ER. Thank you for coming. Thomas positioned himself slightly ahead of Emma, a protective gesture that wasn't lost on Walter. We're here to bring you in, Walter, to end this before anyone else gets hurt. Walter nodded, unsurprised. I expected as much. But first, there are things you need to understand, things I should have told you years ago. He gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the facility. My colleague is in the main laboratory. He can verify everything I'm about to tell you. Thomas hesitated, glancing back at the FBI agents positioned outside. We're not going anywhere until you explain what's happening. Why you helped Reaper escape. Why you betrayed your own people 30 years ago. Walter's expression shifted, pain and resolve mingling in the lines of his weathered face. I never betrayed my people, Thomas. I protected them from something far worse than an ambush. Something that could have killed millions if it had fallen into the wrong hands. The virus, Emma said, understanding dawning. Operation Sandviper wasn't just about extracting an Iraqi scientist. It was about securing a biological weapon. Walter's gaze shifted to her, respect evident in his slight nod. A weaponized hemorrhagic fever virus engineered to be highly contagious and with a mortality rate over 80%. Dr. Farhi had developed it under Saddam's orders, but he wanted to defect to bring his creation to the West, where it could be studied and a vaccine developed. But you didn't trust that would happen, Thomas surmised, pieces falling into place. You thought the virus would be weaponized by our side instead. I knew it would be, Walter corrected. I had seen it happen before in Korea. Weapons developed for defensive purposes inevitably find offensive applications. So I made a choice. I altered the extraction plan, ensured the samples would be secured by people I trusted rather than delivered to military intelligence. You caused the ambush, Thomas said, the realization hitting him with physical force. You got Robert Chen killed, nearly got the rest of us killed too. Walter didn't flinch from the accusation. The ambush wasn't supposed to happen. The Iraqi forces were supposed to engage after you had extracted Dr. Farhi, but before the virus samples could be secured. It was meant to be a diversion, not a slaughter. His voice dropped, old pain evident in every syllable. When it went wrong, when people died, I had to live with that knowledge, but I couldn't change course. The stakes were too high. And King, where does he fit into all this? Emma asked, one hand resting on her abdomen as the baby shifted restlessly within. Raymond knew something had gone wrong with the mission, that someone had compromised it from within. He suspected me, but couldn't prove it. So he built his own narrative, blamed Thomas, used that accusation to cover his own illegal activities. Walter sighed, the weight of decades evident in the sound. When he was arrested, I thought it was over. But he had already hidden away evidence, fragments of communication that pointed to my involvement. He's been using that leverage ever since, extorting protection and resources from me in exchange for his silence. So you helped him escape custody, Thomas concluded, disbelief and betrayal evident in his voice. After everything he's done, you helped him get free. Because he threatened to expose the location of the virus samples, Walter confirmed. Samples that have been secured and studied in secret for 30 years by a team of dedicated scientists working outside government oversight. Scientists who have finally developed a vaccine and treatment protocol that could neutralize the threat permanently. Emma processed this information, her medical mind weighing the implications. That's your colleague in the lab, one of the scientists who's been working on the virus. Walter nodded. Dr. Helen Chen, Robert's widow. She's dedicated her life to ensuring her husband's death wasn't in vain, that the virus he died protecting would never be used as a weapon of mass destruction. The name sent a jolt through Emma. Another connection, another thread in the complex tapestry of deception and sacrifice that had defined their lives without their knowledge. Walter Toa, Thomas said, his voice gentler now. Understanding, replacing accusation. You need to come with us. The FBI can protect the virus. Samples can ensure they're handled properly. Running isn't the answer. I'm not running anymore, Walter replied, a sad smile touching his lips. I'm finishing what I started 30 years ago. Helen has completed her work. The vaccine is ready, the treatment protocol documented. All that remains is to destroy the original samples and ensure that knowledge never falls into the wrong hands. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention, shouts and the distinctive sound of automatic weapons fire cutting through the tension of the moment. Crawford's voice came through their earpieces, urgent and clipped. King is here. Multiple hostiles approaching from the north perimeter. Get Montgomery and get to the secure room immediately. Walter moved with surprising speed for a man his age, leading them deeper into the facility as the sounds of conflict intensified behind them. This way, the lab is reinforced, designed to contain biohazardous materials. It's the safest place in the building. They hurried through antiseptically clean corridors, Emma struggling to keep pace as her pregnant body protested the sudden exertion. Thomas stayed close beside her, one hand at her elbow, the other holding the sidearm Crawford had provided. The laboratory door hissed open as they approached, revealing a state-of-the-art facility that belied the abandoned appearance of the building's exterior. Inside, a petite Asian woman in her 60s looked up from a microscope, alarm evident in her expression as she registered their urgency. Helen, we have company, Walter announced without preamble. King found us sooner than expected. Dr. Helen Chen nodded once, immediately moving to a computer terminal and initiating what appeared to be a security protocol. Steel shutters descended over the laboratory windows, and the main door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss. The samples, Walter asked, moving to a reinforced storage unit in the corner. Ready for final disposal, Helen confirmed, her voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had learned English as an adult. The documentation and vaccine formulas have been encrypted and distributed to our secure network. Emma sank onto a laboratory stool, her hand pressed against her abdomen as a contraction rippled through her. Thomas was at her side instantly, medical concern overriding everything else. And what is it? Just Braxton Hicks, she assured him, though the pain suggested otherwise. Stress triggered. I'm fine. Thomas didn't look convinced, but the immediate crisis demanded his attention. He turned to Walter, who was removing a sealed container from the storage unit. What's your plan? We can't stay locked in here indefinitely. King has resources, determination. We destroy the samples now, Walter replied, placing the container in a specialized incinerator unit. Then we surrender to Crawford's team. Helen's work is complete, documented, and secure. There's nothing left for King to find, no leverage he can use. The building shook with a distant explosion, dust sifting down from ceiling tiles and equipment rattling on the countertops. The battle outside was intensifying, King's forces apparently willing to use extreme measures to breach the facility. Helen moved to Emma's side, her medical training evident in the way she assessed the pregnant woman's condition with quick, efficient movements. How far apart are the contractions? Emma started to deny their significance again, then gasped as another wave of pain swept through her. Maybe 10 minutes. It's too early, I'm only at 35 weeks. Stress can trigger premature labor. Helen confirmed, her manner calm despite the chaos surrounding them. We should get you somewhere more comfortable, monitor your condition. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered momentarily before emergency systems engaged, bathing the laboratory in the amber glow of backup lighting. They're through the main entrance, Walter reported, checking a security monitor. Crawford's people are engaging them, but they're outnumbered. Thomas moved to Emma's side, professional calm masking the fears she knew he must be feeling. We need to get her out of here, now. Walter nodded, moving to a section of wall that appeared no different from the rest of the laboratory. He pressed his palm against a nearly invisible panel, causing a hidden door to slide open. Emergency exit, leads to a service tunnel and comes out half a mile from here. He turned to Helen, a lifetime of unspoken understanding passing between them. Finish it, Destroy everything. Then follow us. Helen nodded, turning back to the incinerator unit to complete the destruction of the virus samples. Walter led Thomas and Emma through the hidden passage, sealing it behind them as they entered a narrow concrete tunnel dimly lit by emergency fixtures. They had progressed perhaps 50 yards when a massive explosion shook the tunnel, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Emma stumbled, crying out as another contraction seized her stronger than the previous ones. "The lab?" Walter said, his expression grim as he steadied himself against the wall. "They must have breached it." Emma gasped, understanding the implications. "We have to go back." "No," Walter's voice was firm, the decision already made. Helen knew the risks. She's prepared for this possibility. He met Thomas's gaze, resolve evident in his weathered features. "Get Emma to safety. I'll go back and help Helen if I can, delay King if I can't." "Walter, no," Thomas began, but the old doctor cut him off with a raised hand. "I started this 30 years ago, Thomas. It's fitting that I finish it now." He looked at Emma, genuine affection, warming his stern expression. "Take care of your family. Live the life you've earned." Before either of them could protest further, Walter was moving back toward the laboratory, his tall frame disappearing into the dimly lit tunnel with surprising speed. Another contraction gripped Emma, more intense than the last, forcing a cry from her lips despite her best efforts to remain silent. Thomas supported her weight, his medical training evident in the calm efficiency with which he assessed her condition. "The baby's coming," she gasped, the realization both terrifying and absolute. "Thomas, the baby's coming now." "I know," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes. "We need to keep moving. Just a little further, Em. Then I can help you." They continued down the tunnel, Emma leaning heavily on Thomas's strength as contractions came with increasing frequency and intensity. The sounds of conflict receded behind them, replaced by the eerie silence of the underground passage. After what seemed an eternity, they reached the end of the tunnel, emerging into a small concrete bunker with a steel ladder leading to a hatch above. Thomas helped Emma to sit on a bench along the wall, quickly assessing their situation with the calm efficiency that had served him through war zones and medical emergencies. "The baby's coming fast," he said, removing his jacket and placing it beneath her. "Too fast to reach help. I'm going to have to deliver here." Emma nodded, another contraction robbing her of speech as her body prepared to bring their daughter into the world in the most unexpected of circumstances. As the pain receded temporarily, she reached for Thomas's hand. "Walter." She managed the question clear despite her labored breathing. Thomas shook his head, no words needed to convey what they both knew. Walter Montgomery had gone back to face Reaper King to protect the work he had dedicated his life to preserving. Whether he survived that confrontation was a question that would have to wait. For now, there was only this moment, this miracle about to unfold in the midst of chaos and danger. As another contraction built, Emma focused on Thomas's steady presence, on the life they had created together despite all the forces arrayed against them. Whatever happened above, whatever price Walter and Helen paid for their decades of secrecy, the future was literally in their hands now. A future embodied in the child about to enter the world, the ultimate testament to hope prevailing over darkness. In that moment, as their daughter fought her way into existence, Emma understood with crystal clarity what Walter had known all along. Some things were worth any sacrifice, any price. Some things transcended personal safety, comfort, even honor. The future, the next generation, the world they would inherit. As the first cry of their newborn daughter echoed through the concrete chamber, Emma felt tears stream down her face, tears of pain and joy, of grief and hope. Thomas placed the tiny, perfect being on her chest, his own eyes glistening with emotion as he beheld the miracle they had created. "She's beautiful," he whispered gently, covering them both with his shirt to maintain warmth in the cool, underground space. "Perfect." Emma cradled their daughter close, marveling at the tiny fingers, the button nose, the wisp of dark hair crowning her head. In this child, she saw the promise of redemption, of new beginnings, of a future untainted by the shadows of the past. "What will we name her?" Thomas asked, his voice choked with emotion. Emma looked down at the miracle in her arms, then back to her husband, the man who had stood beside her through danger and deception, through fear and uncertainty, his love never wavering despite the challenges they had faced. "Hope," she said simply. "Her name is Hope." Above them, the world continued its violent reckoning, the past demanding its due from those who had shaped it. But here in this moment of creation, amidst destruction, Emma and Thomas had found their truth, their purpose, their future. Whatever came next, they would face it together stronger for the trials they had endured, wiser for the truths they had learned. And between them, protected by their love and sacrifice, hope would grow unburdened by the shadows that had defined her parents' lives. In the end, that was Walter's legacy, not the secrets he had kept or the choices he had made, but the future he had protected at any cost. A future where devils could no longer threaten angels, where hope prevailed over darkness, where love endured despite everything arrayed against it. A future embodied in the tiny life now cradled in her mother's arms, welcomed into the world by her father's steady hands. Hope Sullivan, child of secrets, daughter of survivors, bearer of a future bright with promise, the greatest victory of all.